A shelter. German Shepherd won't stop crying and is about to be put down. When the vet discovers the heartbreaking reason behind his tears, he takes urgent action. This dog's story of pain, survival, and hope will leave you speechless. Watch how one man and dog change each other's lives forever. Before you scroll away. My heart honestly sank when I saw that 98% of people watch my videos but don't subscribe. If this video made you feel even a little something, please consider subscribing. It might be just one click for you, but it means the world to me. The rain fell in a steady rhythm outside the shelter, tapping against the windows like a ticking clock. Inside, the sterile scent of disinfectant mingled with the sad, low whimpers echoing through metal kennels. Dogs barked, some with hope, others with weariness, but only one cried, deep, aching sobs that seemed too human for a dog. Kennel number 19 housed a large German Shepherd with fur matted from days of refusal to eat or move. The tag on his cage simply read, "Samson, stray, found alone." His ribs showed beneath his thick coat, his eyes hollow with grief. For 3 days, he hadn't stood up. He didn't growl. He didn't wag his tail. He just cried, loudly, uncontrollably, especially at night. The kind of crying that chilled staff and volunteers alike. Nobody knew what to do with him. Emily, the youngest volunteer at the shelter, had tried everything. Warm food, soft words, gentle touches. But Samson would only look at her with a sadness so deep, it hurt to meet his gaze. He didn't even acknowledge toys. He'd just place his head between his paws and cry. Shelter protocol was clear. If an unclaimed stray showed aggressive, unresponsive, or unadoptable behavior for more than 72 hours, they were moved to the red list. Samson's name was added the morning of the 4th day. "I don't get it," Emily whispered, brushing a tear away as she sat beside his cage. "You're not mean. You're not dangerous. What happened to you?" Her whisper was met with another long, guttural sob from Samson. That same morning, Dr. Ben Carter, the attending shelter vet, walked in with his usual coffee and clipboard. He'd seen cases like this before. He was known for being practical, efficient. And when he saw Samson's name on the red list, he paused, sighed, and flipped the page. "Unadoptable," the form read. "Unresponsive. No medical injuries. Fit for euthanasia." He set the clipboard down, but didn't move. Something in his gut tugged at him. Later that day, as rain turned into a light drizzle, Ben found himself walking past kennel number 19 again. He stopped, stared at Samson for a moment, and then did something he rarely did. He sat down on the floor beside the cage. "You know," Ben said, his voice low and calm, "I've seen a lot of dogs come through here. Most of them bark, some snap, but you—" He trailed off. Samson didn't look up. Ben noticed something odd then. Not just the crying, but the way the dog trembled. Not from cold, from something deeper. Trauma, loss. Something was broken inside this dog. He took out his flashlight, opened the cage carefully, and knelt beside Samson. No resistance, no flinching, just a quiet, breathless sob as the light flashed across his eyes and ears. Healthy, externally. Then Ben noticed something. A small scar near Samson's neck, half hidden under his matted fur. It wasn't new. It was old and clean, like it had healed long ago. It wasn't from a fight. It looked like— "A surgical scar?" Ben murmured. He leaned in closer, gently parting the fur. "Implant site, maybe?" He stood quickly and fetched the scanner. Moments later, he swept it over Samson's body. And a beep. "He's chipped?" Ben blinked, surprised. The screen displayed a registration number. No name, just a contact code from another state. Colorado. Ben frowned. This shelter was in Tennessee. He pulled out his laptop and typed the code into the vet database. What he found made his breath catch. The chip was registered not to an owner, but to a veterinary therapy organization. Samson wasn't a stray. He was a former service dog. Ben's eyes narrowed. A military PTSD therapy program. That would explain the scar, the training, the sadness. But why was he here? Alone? Abandoned? Why didn't anyone call? He whispered to himself. He walked back into the office and pulled Samson's intake file. The officer who'd found him said the dog had been wandering near an old gas station, malnourished, but without signs of abuse. No collar, no tag, no call ever came from the chip registry. Ben sat down heavily. Something was missing. A piece of the puzzle no one had bothered to look for. He stared at the photo attached to the intake form. Samson looked slightly different then, less sunken, but still lifeless. What happened to you, boy? That night, Ben didn't go home. Instead, he returned to kennel number 19 with a blanket and lay down just outside the bars. He said nothing, just stayed. Hours passed. The shelter quieted. Rain returned, softly tapping the roof. And then, for the first time in days, Samson inched closer. He pressed his nose gently against the bars near Ben's hand. Ben didn't move. He let the dog come to him. You remember someone, don't you? Ben whispered. You're not crying because you're afraid. You're crying because you're grieving. The dog's head slumped softly against the bars, and Ben's throat tightened. In the morning, Ben took Samson off the red list. Emily almost cried with joy when she saw the change on the board. What did you do? She asked. I listened, Ben replied, and I think we owe him a chance to be heard. But what neither of them knew yet was why Samson had truly broken down, and what he'd lost. And when Ben finally discovered it, it would change everything. The next morning, the shelter hummed with its usual routine, feeding, walking, cleaning. But something was different in kennel number 19. Samson stood on all four paws, shaky, yes, but standing. Emily gasped when she saw him, his eyes locked on the door like he was waiting for someone. Ben arrived minutes later, carrying a folder and 2 coffees. He handed one to Emily and pointed toward Samson. He stood, she said, breathless. He's watching the door like he's expecting someone. He is, Ben replied, and we need to find out who. Ben had already spent most of the night digging. After discovering Samson's microchip traced back to a therapy dog program in Colorado, he began calling every contact listed in the chip registry. 2 lines were disconnected. 1 number went to voicemail. Finally, someone picked up. This is Officer Rachel Lorne with the Canine Therapy Division, Colorado. Who's calling? Ben quickly explained who he was and how Samson had been found in Tennessee. There was a pause. Then a slow, trembling voice asked, Did you say Samson? Yes, German Shepherd. Scar on the neck. Microchipped through your program. Oh my God, Rachel whispered. He's alive? Ben's stomach tightened. You knew him? I didn't just know him. I trained him, Rachel said. He was part of our trauma recovery unit, assigned to a veteran named Logan West, former Army Ranger. That dog saved that man's life more times than I can count. They were inseparable. Ben frowned. Why was he wandering alone? Rachel's voice cracked. We thought he was dead. Logan was in a car accident 8 months ago. His vehicle went off the side of a mountain road during a snowstorm. The wreckage was found 3 days later. Logan didn't make it. They never found the dog. We assumed he died in the crash or ran off into the wilderness. Ben's throat went dry. He didn't. He made it. Somehow ended up in Tennessee. Rachel whispered, He must have been looking for Logan this whole time. Ben sat down slowly, staring through the glass at Samson, who now paced the front of his kennel with growing restlessness. The dog wasn't broken. He was grieving. "I don't think he's given up," Ben murmured. "He's been crying, not because he's afraid, but because he's mourning." "I need to see him," Rachel said. "I'll drive down." Ben nodded, even though she couldn't see. "I'll keep him safe until you get here." 2 days later, Rachel arrived with a duffel bag, and the moment she stepped into the shelter, Samson froze. His ears perked, his eyes widened. The crying stopped. Rachel knelt, slowly opening the kennel door. "Hey, buddy," she said softly. "You remember me?" Samson took a step forward, then another, and then he was in her arms, whining, not out of fear, but release, relief, recognition. Tears streamed down Rachel's cheeks as she held him. "You never stopped searching, did you? You thought he was still out there." Emily turned away, her hand covering her mouth. Later, in Ben's office, Rachel opened her duffel and pulled out a small tin. Inside was a weathered dog tag. Logan West, K9 Unit, Wampu, Samson. "I kept it after the memorial," she said. "Didn't feel right to throw it away." Ben placed the tag gently on his desk. He didn't need it to remember. He's been carrying Logan with him the whole time. Rachel stayed 2 nights in town, visiting Samson every day. Each visit brought a little more life back into him, a tail wag, a glimmer in his eyes, the way he leaned into her touch. But even she knew what was missing. "He's still waiting for Logan," she said softly. Ben nodded. "He's looking past us, listening for footsteps that aren't coming." Rachel wiped her eyes. "What now?" Ben looked at her, then at Samson, who lay curled on his blanket, holding Logan's old tag between his paws. "I think," Ben said, "we need to give him a goodbye." That weekend, Ben drove with Rachel and Samson to the foothills, where Logan's ashes had been scattered. It wasn't a formal service, just the 3 of them. Rachel knelt on the grass, reading a letter aloud she had written for Samson. "You were his hero, just as much as he was yours," she said, "and he would want you to keep living. He would want you to keep saving someone else." Samson sat quietly, unmoving, eyes locked on the horizon. Then, after a long silence, he stood and walked forward, nose to the earth. He pawed once at the dirt, then sat. It was his way of saying goodbye. Back at the shelter, Rachel turned to Ben. "He can't come back with me. My unit's been disbanded. Too much red tape. But he deserves more than a kennel." Ben looked down at the dog, who now followed him from room to room. "Then maybe it's time I stopped being just his vet." Rachel smiled. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." As the sun set, Samson lay curled at Ben's feet in the vet office, his breathing slow and steady. For the first time in weeks, there were no cries, only silence. But peace wasn't the end of this story, because something was still missing. And when Ben received a phone call a week later, what he heard made him freeze in place. A man's voice, worn, ragged. I heard you found a dog, a German shepherd. His name's Samson?" Ben dropped his coffee. "You're Logan?" The line went quiet, then, "I was reported dead." "But I wasn't." Ben's heart pounded as he gripped the phone tighter. "Logan, is this some kind of joke?" The voice cracked on the other end. "I wish it was, but it's really me." Ben shut the office door, waving off Emily, who stood at the threshold, concern etched into her face. He turned back to the call, lowering his voice. "We thought you were dead," Rachel said. "They told her I didn't make it," Logan interrupted. "The accident. It was bad. I was in a coma for months. No ID on me. Wallet must have been thrown from the truck. By the time I came to, I had no memory. They called me a John Doe." Ben felt the room tilt slightly. You were gone 8 months. I know, Logan whispered. When my memory came back, I asked about Samson. But no one knew where he was. I thought he'd died in the crash. Ben swallowed. He survived. He made it through miles of forest. Got picked up 3 states away. He never stopped crying, Logan. There was silence. Then the unmistakable sound of a man weeping. I thought I'd lost him forever, Logan choked out. Ben pulled in a shaky breath. You haven't. He's here, with me. Is he okay? He was broken, Ben said gently, until he heard your name. They agreed to meet the next morning. Logan would make the drive overnight. Ben barely slept, his thoughts a blur of emotions, grief, disbelief, and something more fragile. Hope. At sunrise, he sat beside Samson, who had grown quieter over the last week. The dog had stopped pacing, stopped crying. It wasn't peace. It was numbness, like he'd accepted a world without Logan, until headlights pulled into the parking lot. Samson's ears perked, his nose twitched. He stood, tail rigid. Then the shelter door creaked open. Samson, came a hoarse whisper. The German shepherd froze, and then it happened. A low whine, a sound that cracked the air like thunder. Samson leapt forward, paws scrambling across the tile. He collided with Logan in a blur of fur and limbs, knocking the man to the floor. Logan held him tight, his body shaking with sobs. You found me, he whispered over and over. You found me. Ben and Emily turned away, neither of them hiding their tears. The reunion lasted minutes that felt like lifetimes. Logan cradled Samson's face between his hands, pressing his forehead to the dog's. I'm so sorry I left you, he said. I didn't know who I was, but I never stopped feeling like something was missing. Samson whimpered and licked Logan's face, pawing at his chest as if trying to crawl inside him, into the heart he'd never stopped searching for. Rachel arrived later that day, summoned by Ben with nothing more than 2 words. He's back. When she saw Logan standing in the doorway, bruised but alive, she gasped and covered her mouth. You're real, she breathed. He smiled through tears. Guess I wasn't done yet. That evening, the 4 of them sat on the shelter's back porch, Logan, Rachel, Ben, and Emily, with Samson stretched between them, his head resting peacefully in Logan's lap. What happens now? Rachel asked. I've got no job, no house, Logan admitted. But I've got him. That's enough to start with. Ben nodded. You've both been through hell. But together, I think you'll make it. Logan reached into his jacket and pulled out something he'd carried through the crash, through the coma, through his long road back. A dog tag, bent and scratched. He held it up beside the one Rachel had saved. A perfect match. I thought he died, Logan said softly. But maybe he saved me instead. Samson stirred, tail thumping gently. Logan smiled down at him. Guess we saved each other. In the weeks that followed, Logan and Samson disappeared into the quiet countryside of Tennessee, finding shelter in a borrowed cabin on land owned by one of Rachel's friends. There were no cameras, no noise, just bird song and the sound of a man and his dog healing together. Ben received postcards every so often. A picture of Samson curled by a fireplace, Logan holding a fishing rod, Samson in a life vest beside him in a canoe. No words, just the image, and it said everything. But one postcard came with a note, written in Logan's careful, slightly shaky handwriting. Some days I still wake up in a panic, thinking it was all a dream, that he's gone. And then I feel the weight of him at my feet, hear that breath, that steady rhythm. And I know he came back for me. He never gave up. When the world forgot me, he remembered. That's the kind of love that doesn't die. It just waits. Ben kept that note on the wall in his office, pinned above Samson's original intake photo. A reminder of what the world often overlooked. The pain animals carry, the loyalty they live by, and the miracles that happen when someone finally listens. And yet, this wasn't quite the end. Because as Samson and Logan rebuilt their lives, another story was quietly unfolding. One that would pull them both back into a place of pain and purpose. A story buried in the corners of the shelter, waiting to be unearthed. And when it did, everything they thought they'd left behind would come rushing back. The early days in the cabin brought silence, and with it, peace. Logan rose with the sun, his hands still stiff from the crash, and Samson would wait by the door, ready to walk beside him no matter how far or slow they went. Each morning they carved a little more life into the landscape, a path worn smooth by boots and paws, a garden tilled with effort and quiet hope. But peace, as Logan knew too well, had a way of whispering reminders from the past. It started with a letter. Mailed to the shelter and forwarded to Ben's office, the envelope bore no return address, just a typewritten label, RE:German Shepherd, possibly military. Ben opened it with a chill of curiosity, scanning the page until his eyes caught a familiar name. Samson. He called Logan immediately. "You said he wasn't chipped," Logan said, standing outside with Samson lying at his feet. "What's this about?" "The letter's from a man who says he recognized Samson online," Ben replied. "He claims Samson was trained on a black ops base, not just military, a covert handler. No record in public systems." Logan frowned. "I thought he came from the police K-9 program." "That's what we assumed," Ben said. "But this guy, he included a photo, taken 5 years ago." Logan waited. "I'm sending it to you now." The image arrived seconds later. It was Samson, no doubt, but leaner, younger, standing beside a man in desert fatigues. His eyes were different, harder, alert, and beside him, holding the leash, was not Logan. It was someone else, someone Logan didn't recognize. He stared at the screen long after the call ended, the wind rustling the trees around him. Samson lifted his head from the porch and tilted it, sensing the shift in his friend. "Is there more?" Rachel asked that night when Logan showed her the photo. "There's always more," Logan murmured. "We just don't know it yet." The next few days blurred with research. Ben and Emily helped from the shelter's end, quietly reaching out to contacts who owed favors. A name surfaced. Doctor. Michael Paxton, an ex-military vet turned civilian trainer, now working out of a remote ranch in Wyoming. "He's the one who trained a lot of the ghost dogs," Ben told Logan. "Dogs like Samson, no records, no medals, just classified missions and quiet burials." Logan booked the trip without hesitation. He and Samson drove for 2 days straight, sleeping in the truck at gas stations, sharing sandwiches, their bond stretched across the long miles like a lifeline. When they arrived at the ranch, the land was quiet, ringed with snow-dusted peaks. Dr. Paxton, gray-haired and stooped but sharp-eyed, met them at the gate. He took one look at Samson and froze. "Ghost," he said softly. Samson didn't growl. He didn't bark. He sat, just like that, rigid, still, like he remembered the command from another lifetime. "You know him?" Logan asked. "I trained him," Paxton said. "He wasn't called Samson then. We called him Ghost. Fastest, smartest dog I ever worked with. Disappeared on a mission 3 years ago. We thought he'd been killed in a mountain blast." Logan's throat tightened. "He survived. But he found me." Paxton crouched, holding out his hand. Samson didn't move at first. Then slowly, as if unlocking something buried deep, the dog stepped forward, sniffed the air, and gently pressed his head into the man's palm. A single tear slid down Paxton's face. "I'm sorry, boy. We left you behind." They talked for hours, about Ghost's missions, the things he'd seen, the men he'd saved. No records existed. No medals had ever been awarded. Just whispers among units and the silence of survivors. "He wouldn't eat after the blast," Paxton said. "He watched 3 handlers die. Then he ran, disappeared into the wild. We assumed he was gone." "He found me," Logan repeated. "And he saved me." That night, under the stars, Logan sat beside Samson near the cabin Paxton offered them for the weekend. He scratched behind his ears. "You had another name," Logan said quietly. "Another life." Samson's eyes found his, calm, steady. "But you came back for me," Logan whispered. The next morning, Paxton gave Logan a worn box. "He was the only dog I ever kept a journal for," the man admitted. "He was special. I think he deserves to have it. Inside were notes, photos, field reports, evidence of a life few would ever believe." As Logan packed to leave, Paxton laid a hand on his shoulder. "He's seen things, son. Things that leave scars, just like you." "I know," Logan said. "That's why we understand each other." Back in Tennessee, Logan placed the journal on the cabin shelf, next to a photo of Samson curled by the fire. He didn't need to read the whole thing yet. He'd seen enough. The dog who had once been Ghost was now Samson, reborn through loyalty, through love, through survival. And yet, something had shifted in Samson since the trip. He began waking at night again, sitting by the window for hours, ears alert, eyes on the woods. Logan tried to soothe him, but something was stirring in the old soldier's bones. Something coming, something remembered. And neither of them was ready for what would happen next. The wind howled louder that night than any before. Trees groaned. Snow tapped at the windows like impatient fingers. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled, but Logan couldn't sleep. Neither could Samson. He sat by the window, rigid again, the same way he had when Logan first found him. His body was still, but his ears twitched at every sound. Something in the air had shifted, and whatever it was, Samson had felt it before Logan did. Around midnight, the silence broke. A single engine, far off, creeping closer. Logan sat up, pulled on his boots, and instinctively reached for the revolver tucked away in the drawer. Not because he expected trouble, but because Samson expected it. And the dog had never been wrong. Samson didn't bark. He didn't move. But his hackles were raised, and his breathing grew tight and deliberate. The vehicle stopped at the edge of the drive, headlights off, just silence. Then footsteps, crunching the gravel slowly. Logan opened the cabin door, his silhouette framed by firelight. "Who's there?" he called, voice even. From the shadows stepped a figure in a coat, his face hidden under a wool cap. His hands were raised. "Not here to cause harm," the man said. "Just need a moment. You have something that belongs to me." Samson growled low. Logan steadied his hand. "You need to leave." The man took one step forward. 3 years ago, he disappeared during a mission. They told us he was dead. He wasn't. He went rogue. I trained the dog. I was his last handler." Logan's eyes narrowed. "Then why wasn't he chipped?" The man hesitated. "Because the missions weren't exactly official." Logan nodded once. "Then neither is your claim." The man sighed. "Listen, I'm not here to take him. I just need to see him, just once. I've been looking since I saw that shelter video. He saved my life more than once. I left him in the field because I thought I had no choice." Logan stepped aside slowly, letting the man see inside. Samson stood there. No leash, no command, just a gaze that held centuries of war and sorrow. The man dropped to his knees. "Hey, buddy, it's me." Samson stared for a moment. Then, without barking or growling, he stepped forward, slowly, cautiously. Then he sat. Not beside the man, but between him and Logan. Protective. Present. The man swallowed hard, eyes wet. "He chose you." Logan didn't say anything. He didn't need to. "Thank you," the man whispered, "for giving him peace." And without another word, he rose, turned, and disappeared back into the night. The truck rolled away down the mountain road, headlights off, never to return. The next morning, Logan awoke to find Samson curled up beside the door, his breathing calm for the first time in weeks. Whatever chapter he needed to close had closed. From then on, things shifted. Samson no longer stood at the window. He spent more time lying beside Logan, walking the trails with a relaxed gait, greeting Rachel and Emily when they visited. He even returned to the shelter once, not as a resident, but as a helper. Ben chuckled when he saw the massive shepherd standing beside a trembling puppy in the corner pen, gently nudging it forward, just like he'd once been nudged. "He remembers," Ben said softly. Logan nodded. "He remembers everything." Months passed, and the seasons turned. The garden bloomed. The cabin walls, once bare, held pictures of Samson in the field, beside Logan, with the shelter crew, and even with the wide-eyed children from the local school who visited to read to the animals. Word about Samson's story had spread after Emily quietly shared the details with a journalist friend. The piece was titled, "The Ghost Who Found His Home." People wrote letters, veterans, rescue workers, survivors, all of them moved by a dog who'd survived war, abandonment, and near euthanasia, and still chose to love. And then, one spring morning, something remarkable happened. Logan walked to the porch with his coffee, and Samson bounded out before him, more energized than usual. He ran to the garden edge, barked once, then twice, short, sharp bursts. Logan followed. Nestled in the tall grass behind the shed was a small bundle of fur. A puppy. Abandoned, shivering, covered in ticks and mud. Samson licked its face gently, then looked back at Logan. "You found him," Logan said softly. "Just like I found you?" They took the pup inside, cleaned it, warmed it, fed it. The shelter confirmed no one had reported a missing dog. It had likely been dumped. Logan called him Scout, and Samson, well, he became something new. A mentor, a protector, a father, watching over the pup with patient strength, just as he once guarded Logan through fire and storm. In the end, the story wasn't about a dog who cried in a shelter. It was about what those tears meant. Pain, yes, but also memory, hope, and a will to survive. And when the world turned dark and uncertain, it wasn't just a vet who took action. It was a man broken by loss, a dog haunted by war, and the quiet, sacred moment when two souls chose to save each other. Together. Forever.